Whenever I start talking about the Bad album and my time in the studio, it's that fine line that I have to walk. Do I want to get too technical? How deep do I want to go into the technical side of some of these conversations? I'm talking about the Bad album. This is, I guess you might call this part 2. And I think this time we might just dig a little bit into the tech side of it, and also, keep it human, talk about Michael and the crew that was involved. So my name is Brad Sundberg. This is In the Studio, the podcast. All right, so welcome back. It's actually been fun doing the podcast, especially now that we're doing a video podcast, makes it even more interesting. But doing a video podcast, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of setup that goes on behind the scenes. Maddie does an amazing job of prepping everything and doing the editing and kind of the final version that hopefully you're enjoying. But it's just time, you have to kind of carve out some time, and we've got our little production room. And so it's been fun to kind of get back into the groove just a little bit. So I did pour myself a fresh cold Guinness. Cheers. If you're a Guinness person, maybe go grab one. If not, find the beverage of your choice. And we're going to dive into the Bad album just a bit. There's a couple of the almost kind of the human side of the Bad album, a couple things I want to touch on before we dig a lot deeper. The project really was fun. Walking into that studio, it was welcoming and it was warm. There were, and I'm being totally honest, I mean, it's been over three and a half decades, but my memories are still pretty clear about what happened. There weren't like yelling matches or fights. There was very little drama at all. It was 4 professionals, Quincy, Bruce, Rod, and Michael, who were at the top of their game. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I mean, think about Michael. Michael's coming off Thriller. Thriller, depending on, what chart you believe and numbers and all that. But back then, I mean, Thriller had probably sold close to 40 million. That was kind of the number that got kicked around quite a bit. Since then, it's sold many, many more, but that's got to weigh heavy. And there's the rumors, Michael wrote, 100 million on the Mirror or something. And I don't know. I never saw that, and we never really talked about it. Again, if someone else was in the room, they might have a slightly different recollection. But Quincy and Michael didn't really sit back in their chairs and, boy, this is sure going to sell a lot of records, and, we got to beat Thriller. I don't remember any of those kind of conversations. They were there to work, and they were there to create an amazing record, and I think they succeeded. A couple other things. This was when, to the best of my knowledge, Michael really created what we call Family Friday. And every Friday, Catherine and Laura, the Slam Dunk sisters, would come in and set up just an enormous feast in the studio. And I remember a lot of times it would be in the tracking room, the big recording room of the studio, because we didn't really want to bring a lot of food into the control room. And we'd set it up on tables and on rolling rack cases. There might be some guitar amps or something. And we would set up all this food. And I don't know, there'd be like paper plates and plastic forks and everything. And it was a feast. I mean, it was a full-on, it might be a turkey dinner, roast beef, fried chicken, collard greens, mashed potatoes, gravy, corn muffins, and then almost every time, in fact, I'd probably say every time, one of the dessert choices would be banana pudding. And Catherine would make this amazing banana pudding. And it was, it was for us, it was for the musicians, the techs, and then over time, some of the other techs in the building, might kind of slip in, they'd be invited, and we'd kind of bring them in and, make sure they got food, the runners. So Friday became just notorious for food. Everybody loved that. We'd all watch. There was a camera in the control room, and not in the control room, a TV. And so we'd watch the TV, kind of watching with a camera on the back parking lot when Catherine was going to pull up. And man, we would, a few of us would jump up and go out and start carrying dishes and boxes and get everything all set up because we knew it was going to be just an amazing feast. And it was a really fun time when the session would stop and everybody would just sit on the floor, sit on, Westlake has kind of a raised stage area where you could sit back there. There were chairs in the room and you would just, hang out and grab lunch and tell stories. I think they'd come like around 3 in the afternoon, as I recall, 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And Michael was Michael. I mean, he was listening, he was, laughing, and he loved, the stories. He wasn't the center of attention. He was part of the group. And quite honestly, he was one of the more quiet members of the group. He just loved eating the food and listening to everyone tell their stories. And I don't want to make it sound like it was story time, but you know how it is with a group of people and, somebody kind of talks about what they did that weekend or, what they were going to do this weekend. And it just kind of, conversation bounces around. And it's just really sweet, fun memories of the session just coming to a stop for those breaks. A couple other things. Michael came in, he saw me one day and he just started, he was singing Bad. And instead of singing Bad, Bad, Really, Really Bad, he started singing Brad, Brad, Really, Really Brad. Hey, it's really, really Brad. And the nickname stuck. And especially he and Bruce and Quincy, when I walked in the room, quite often, they would either say or sing, hey, it's Brad, Brad, really, really Brad. And they even put that on the liner notes. Nobody reads liner notes anymore, but I got kind of a thank you credit as Brad, really, really Brad Sundberg, which is cool. It's kind of a fun little memory, nice little nod from Michael that he actually put my nickname into the liner notes. Beyond that, I mean, there's just, as I think about these sessions, there's so many memories. But what I want to do is just dive a little bit. I'm going to kind of keep going on the songs, but I want to talk a little bit about the tech side of it also. It was a very technical album, meaning the amount of work that went into that studio before Michael walked in the door is pretty amazing. That whole console was modified. It was called a Harrison MR2. And if you don't know anything about recording studios, kind of the big dogs, especially back then, were like Neve and SSL. Those were the big heavyweight console companies, and everybody wanted to work on a Neve. Everybody wanted to work on an SSL. Harrison, not so much. Harrison, I sometimes describe it as more of like an F-150 pickup truck. It'll get you where you need to go. It's not going to be the fanciest ride, but it's bulletproof. I mean, it'll take a beating and just keep working and working. Bruce loved working on Harrison consoles, and this one was highly modified, had all Jensen transformers, and it was a great sounding console. And the Westlake Studio techs were and are among some of the best techs on the planet. I mean, they had that room sounding just incredibly good. And then before we would really sink into a project, especially, as I worked with Bruce more and more over the years, I mean, I would check every single patch point and every equalizer and every bus on every module for hours. I mean, this was done before Michael walked in the room, so that when Michael did walk in the room and the room is up and running, there's no such thing as a guarantee. There's no such thing as a perfect problem-free room. But our studios were we'd gotten rid of most of the bugs before the client walked in. And that takes a lot of time and, quite frankly, a little bit of money. But that's what this production team wanted, was as close to perfection as they could get. Bruce would do things... Bruce Swedien, remarkable engineer. Feel free to dig into Bruce Swedien's discography, and it's just amazing the work that he's done. And of course, Bruce passed a couple of years ago, and he was just a legend, kind of a grandfather in the industry. Bruce was always all about reducing as much noise as possible. Noise is kind of your enemy in recording studios. Noise is, it's, anything that adds sound to the recording that you don't want. It's just a constant battle to get rid of noise, get rid of clicks and pops and buzzes. So we would go to just extremes of trying to eliminate any kind of ground hums. And if you're not a techie person, I'm not going to dwell on this for too long, but even something like plugging a microphone preamp into the wall. Hollywood is notorious for what's called dirty power, noisy power. And even plugging a microphone preamp into the wall would sometimes add a little bit of noise. So we actually Bruce brought in like a boat battery, and we started using like power inverters, and we would not even use the electricity in the wall for things like microphones and mic preamps. It's something when I teach in recording schools, I try and pound that into their heads of don't cut corners. Do not cut corners. Get rid of any noise, any problem that you can before or early in the project. It's not something you want to deal with later on. So Bruce taught me a lot about how to make a room absolutely as quiet as possible, because at the end of the day, what you guys want to hear is Michael's voice. You want to hear his voice. You want to hear the rhythm track that we've built, and free of any clutter and noise that the electricity or whatever might induce. So that was something that we took very, very seriously. Another monster cable. I've written about monster cable a couple times, and this is not an endorsement. Noel, or if the monster cable team wants to send me a few cables, I won't say no. But I'm talking more about what happened back then. Bruce was a firm believer and kind of an early believer in the how great quality cables can and will improve the sound, and they reject noise, like I just talked about. A lot of the time we're just trying to get rid of any noise. So Bruce and Noel Lee at Monster were really good friends, and Noel would reach out to us and say, hey, I've got some new cables you guys should try. And here they'd show up, and we'd hook them up. A lot of the recording with especially Michael's vocals was all done through Monster Cable. Again, not an endorsement, but just telling you. So, I mean, Monster Cable does get some credits on the record, and they actually produced the bad, what was it called? The bad remixes. You guys probably know, but they produced that project separately and released that. I think they gave them away to Monster dealers or something, but it was a really great collection of remixes that Bruce did kind of at the end of the project, again, all through Monster Cable. I was thinking about another tech deep dive. I'm going to try and make this brief, because it's going to take a little bit of math to understand this. So if you have no interest in math or anything like that, feel free to skip ahead. But one of the things that we were kind of groundbreaking on, if I can be so bold, is Bruce was recording a lot of the songs to be between 9 and 10 minutes long. And it gave him a lot of flexibility to do breakdowns and add, do double choruses, and basically, for lack of a better word, copy paste parts of a song to different parts of the same song. So he really came up with this concept. I give Bruce a lot of credit. By then we were using, again, I told this before, we recorded the album on analog tape, and then we would transfer it via Monster Cable immediately to digital tape, to a Mitsubishi X850. And one of the things that he came up with was what's called offsets. So imagine you've got verse 1 of a song, and you want to move that back to verse 4. All right. And I'm just going to make up numbers, but we're going to say that maybe that's 4 minutes later. So we'll say verse 1 starts at 1 minute and verse 4 starts at 5 minutes, and we want to move verse 1 back to verse 4. That's a 4-minute offset, it's called. And so you've got to make the two machines play 4 minutes apart, but exactly on tempo, because you can't just throw verse 1 4 minutes later and have it not match in with the tempo of the song. So he and Craig Johnson really came up with a really cool little computer program where they would find the precise tempo of the song. Again, I'm trying to make this quick, but they would offset the tapes drastically, we'll say 6 minutes apart, and then they'd line up the kick drums. And when you line up two, because the songs obviously on the Bad album, with one exception, came from drum machines or computers. And drum machines and computers all play at, one drum machine might say that a tempo was 119, and another drum machine might say a tempo is 119, but they're actually different tempos. That's true. Not every clock in every drum machine is the same. We would find the exact tempo of each song to like 4 decimal digits. So even though the songwriter might think that the tempo was 118, when Bruce and Craig would do their math and do these massive offsets and line up the kick drums and make the kick drums play out of phase with each other, we might find that the tempo is actually 117.4497. And that would be our tempo. And we would use that tempo to feed into the computer anytime we wanted to offset the tapes. I know I've probably lost a lot of you trying to explain that, but what it did was it was a little process that took, we could find the tempo maybe in 8-10 minutes, something like that. And once we had that, the sky's the limit. Then we could do offsets all over the place and give Bruce an enormous amount of freedom to extend songs, to insert breakdowns, to double choruses, do all kinds of things, which you guys that probably work on Pro Tools and Logic and things like that, for you, it's just simple because you just, drag stuff around and it does it. But back then we're working with physical tape and we've got to move choruses, to the back of a song. And it was a really unique process that Bruce came up with. And so we had this little SMPTE calculator, and that's how we would create, for a lot of these songs, we were doing single mixes for South America and doing dance mixes for Europe and a cappella mixes and TV mixes and video mixes. And it just made the process of what's called post-production a lot faster, being able to just line up these different songs and just move choruses and verses very quickly. It was really cool technology at the time. It's really cool technology today. It's just that now most engineers are, obviously using computers and Pro Tools and things like that, not doing it kind of the the antiquated way, but cool antiquated way that we did it. Going on with kind of the tech side, we really had kind of the best of everything. If a new microphone was coming out or a new mic preamp or a new amplifier, Bruce Swedien on a high budget Michael Jackson album is pretty much going to get whatever he wants. It's kind of a funny industry where, great guitar players get free guitars. They can afford any guitar they want, but obviously every guitar manufacturer wants them to play that guitar. And it's the same with engineers, especially someone of Bruce's caliber. Microphone manufacturers. I mean, he was good friends with different mic manufacturers. And if they had a new toy, I call it a toy, but if they had a new mic or whatever, we'd get it. And sometimes Bruce would try it, sometimes not. We don't always have time to sit and, diddle around, for 3 hours with a new microphone. We definitely had amazing equipment, amazing, well-built studio, and then you've got Bruce, who's even pushing the limits even further. I remember him talking about one of his sayings, and Bruce had a lot of sayings, but he'd tell me, Brad, don't trust your eyes, trust your ears. And especially with young engineers, you get really excited about whether it's, watching the meters on a compressor. Now, everything is plugins, and watching all the cool little animations on the screen and everything. And Bruce would just be like, close your eyes. Just close your eyes and listen. Listen to the music. Don't sit and stare at meters. And, both he and Quincy would say, nobody buys a record because of the console. They buy the record because of the song. And at the inside of all of this is great songs, great music. Us making it sound as good as possible, that's next. But it all starts with a great song. And that was just some really cool lessons. They seem obvious now, looking back and talking about it, but I still kind of warn young engineers, don't get wrapped up in having every plugin that you can find. Just start with a good song, a good singer, and start building from there. Sorry for that deep dive. I might touch back on a couple other things, but let's kind of keep going through the album. So we talked about The Way You Make Me Feel a little bit. One memory I have about that, when the music video, Bruce did the remix for the music video, and we were over at a studio called Todd A.O. in Hollywood. And those are sometimes called like scoring studios, more post-production studios than music studios. It's kind of fun. I got to, kind of go to a different room, and you're watching the video on just this enormous screen. And then a lot of times there'd be 3 mixers, especially when a feature film or a big music video is being mixed. It's these massive consoles, and there'd be 3 engineers at the console. One of them is dialogue. He or she needs to make sure that any spoken word, any dialogue is heard really clearly. Then another engineer is just doing effects, just special effects, the cars whizzing by and all that. And then the third engineer is doing music, which of course is Bruce. So we went over to Todd A.O. It seems like you're always working at night, but I just have these memories of being just crazy late at night. And I think we got a couple pizzas and just watching that video. Michael in that blue shirt, who was it, Tatiana, I believe it was, and just this gorgeous, gorgeous video, and the dancing and the choreography, the direction, the cinematography, everything about it was, absolute first rate. I've kind of used this description before. Working with Michael, a lot of times I kind of use the word a cocoon, because you're in a little recording studio. And there might be, sometimes it was just me and Michael and one engineer. Sometimes it was just me and Michael. Now, on the Bad album, you did have Bruce and Rod and Quincy. And so it was a little bit of a bigger team. It's interesting. As the albums progressed over the years, a lot of times those teams got smaller and smaller. But we'll talk about that more in the future. When you're with Michael in the studio, it's a bit like a cocoon. And you're joking with him, you're throwing popcorn at him. Popcorn, that's the other thing. During the Bad album, we had 2 air poppers upstairs and just blowing out popcorn. And we're trying to be like kind of healthy, but then you put it on like a whole cup of butter. Shopping bags. We'd come down with just shopping bags of fresh made popcorn from upstairs. The studio actually had an upstairs lounge and an upstairs office for Michael. So there was you'd be throwing popcorn at Michael, and but that would be kind of in the cocoon where you're having, family Friday dinner with the Slam Dunk Sisters, and Michael's there, and he's, got his Ray-Bans down on the tip of his nose, and that's Michael. But then I go to Todd A.O. and I watch the beautiful film that he's made, and it's Michael Jackson. Oh, it's Michael the superstar. And I say that with respect, but it was always kind of interesting. It's kind of like I'm so close to Michael in this little cocoon and just a little family. And then every now and then you have to kind of let him fly and be free and do videos and do tours and be Michael Jackson the superstar, which is who he always was. But when we had him in a little studio, it was really special. And it was kind of fun to have that dichotomy of Michael in the cocoon and Michael on this enormous screen at Todd A.O. Doing The Way You Make Me Feel. Let me keep moving on. Speed Demon. I just wrote about this. Michael did love to drive. If Matt Forger were here, he could help me out just a little bit. I think it was when they were doing what's called the pre-production over at Havenhurst, Michael's home studio. Michael got a speeding ticket. He was driving one of his cars. He might have been driving his big truck or something. And he got pulled over by the police and got a ticket. And so he came into the studio. Matt's told me this story several times. And it may have been at Westlake. I don't remember, so forgive me. But Michael came into the studio and he was very embarrassed. He was kind of a little bit humiliated that, the police had pulled him over, and Michael's pretty squeaky clean. And he really kind of thought that was, kind of bad. No pun intended. And everyone had to kind of understand that Michael's been very sheltered. And everyone had to tell him, look, man, we've all had speeding tickets. Everyone in this room has been pulled over, and it's just part of life. If you drive a car, every now and then you're going to hit the pedal a little bit too hard, and it's going to be at the wrong time, and you're going to get a speeding ticket. And so we had to almost calm Michael down just a little bit, that it really wasn't a big deal, that it doesn't make you a bad person by any means. People get tickets. And so out of that grew the song Speed Demon. And maybe it was his cathartic way of dealing with himself getting a ticket. I don't know. It was a fun song, obviously very, guitar-driven song. I'm just looking here. Larry Williams did the MIDI sax solo. I do remember that. Larry had kind of a new saxophone that would play the notes on a keyboard. And so it was really, it was a lot of kind of new innovation, new technology that we were trying. So the little solo that you hear in there is Larry Williams playing a saxophone, but it's also playing a keyboard, which is pretty cool. Somehow I haven't talked a lot about, the names on here. Michael Boddicker, Greg Phillinganes, obviously John Barnes again. Greg Phillinganes, everybody loves Greg Phillinganes. Remarkably talented, one of my favorite pianists on the planet, or keyboard players, and a very close friend of Michael's. And the thing with a lot of these guys is they bring a personality. Obviously, talent is one thing, but they would also just bring humor and bring levity. And recording studios, believe it or not, can be really boring and monotonous, working on the same songs day after day after day. So when a John Barnes or a Greg Phillinganes or one of these guys comes in, it's a bit like having a comedian come in. Greg is extremely funny, and he knew how to make Michael laugh. And he's a smart guy. That's part of the gig, is not taking any of his amazing musical ability away from him. But it's more than that. There has to be a bond, there has to be a friendship, and there has to be, and that really went with any of us that worked with Michael long term. Yeah, you do your job, but it's more than that. You have to build a trust. You have to build some humor. Either Michael, you can't fake it. Either Michael likes you or he doesn't. And people that come on too strong, it's not going to last very long. Greg Phillinganes lasted years and years and decades and decades. Shout out to Mr. Greg Phillinganes. I'd love to have a chat with Greg sometime. I haven't talked to him in a long time, and it'd be great if he could do one of my events at some point. Oh, Liberian Girl definitely has John Barnes written all over it. Just a beautiful song. And that's when I do my seminars, my live events, I really take people through the background vocals and talk about this beautiful Michael Jackson choir that Bruce and Quincy built. The background vocals on that are just spectacular. I've had a conversation with Brad Buxer about this, and we haven't physically done it yet, but Michael's ability to recreate vibrato in his voice, he could nail it time after time after time, exactly the same. Buxer and I have been wanting to just find some background vocals and actually put them onto a scope or onto a spectrum analyzer and just look, because it was almost not human what Michael could do with his voice in terms of matching vibrato over and over and over again. So it's just, you just get goosebumps. It's such a unique unusual talent that he had, being able to control his voice and especially the vibrato of his voice. Just good friends. Again, I'm a white kid that grew up, in Santa Cruz, California. Grew up listening to Peter Frampton and Van Halen and AC/DC and Def Leppard and Thriller. I'm not going to discount that at all. But a lot of my music was more of the rock and pop genre. That's just where I come from. So for me to be in the same room with Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder, now of course I know who Stevie Wonder is. Stevie came in to both sing and do the keyboard solo on Just Good Friends. He did it all in one day. I think it was one afternoon into an evening. And I was young. I mean, this was really my first album project. I didn't have the 15, 20 years of getting ready for this moment. And next thing you know, I'm setting up a keyboard for Stevie Wonder. Is it the greatest song in the world? No. It's a fun song that I think it's amazing that the two of them did it together. To be there at that time and watch the interaction, especially between Michael and Stevie and Quincy, decades of music prowess and R&B, black music prowess. To watch the three of them gel, along with obviously Bruce, capturing the moment, and Rod, but it really was magic. And I stood, probably from 5-6 feet away from Stevie, and when he did the keyboard solo, and just to watch him work, and watch how comfortable and how funny, relaxed he was in the moment. And I mean, he's the center of attention. It's kind of funny because he and Michael, their personalities are different, and they're both amazing. Stevie loves being, in the center of attention, and that's amazing. And he was the star that night. Just being able to be there and be a part of it. There's memories that I have, and I have to be really careful not to sound like I'm bragging, but there's things that happen in recording studios, and there's things that happen in everybody's life. But for people that, work or have worked in and around recording studios, there's those moments when, the hair on your arm starts standing up, and that there's nowhere else on the planet that you would rather be than right there at that moment. And you're very blessed to be there at that moment. And for me, I mean, watching Stevie and Michael sing together, laugh together, play together, that was one of those moments. And it's, I sometimes, tell my wife there's like entire months of my life that I don't remember. Your brain can only have so many memories. But there are moments like that are just seared in. I know right where I was standing, and I know right where Stevie was, and I know right where Michael was. And those are priceless. Those are just dear memories that you just cherish. And in my case, I try to share and try and take people there as much as I can. It's kind of funny. One of the things that jumps out at me when I read, I'm holding... For those of you that are just listening on the podcast, you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm actually holding the liner notes from the Bad album, and I'm just reading through them a little bit. And now it comes to side 2, which is kind of interesting because, people under a certain age have no idea what side 1 and side 2 of a record are, nor do they really understand the power of sequencing a record. Man, that's another whole tangent I could run down for a while. The importance of which song comes first and second and third. Probably going to gloss over that for the most part, right? I might do that in a future chat sometime. So we start side 2, and we jump right in with another part of me. So this is a funny one for me personally, because I was so closely involved on the Captain EO project. And of course, Captain EO was when Michael first did another part of me. I don't know if you can tell, if I haven't made it clear, I'm wearing a Disneyland shirt right now, which was kind of unintentional, but that's just me. But I really do love Disney. I've always loved Disney. And I proposed to my wife, Debbie, at Disneyland. And I was able to tell Michael that. I told Michael 2 stories about, number one, I did tell him that I proposed to Deb at Disneyland, and he loved that. He thought that was really sweet. And I told him another story I thought was kind of funny. When I was in the 7th grade, I think it was, no, I think it was 9th grade. Forgive me. I was in the 9th grade, which in the U.S. is usually called a freshman in high school. And I had my first little girlfriend. And to save her any embarrassment, I won't mention her name. I had this little girlfriend that I met at camp. Well, we were far apart. And so she was in her part of the state and I was in my part of the state. Well, she's meeting other boys at school and, we're trying to write letters and, keep this little, thing alive. And then one day I got a letter from her and it was kind of a, what's known as a Dear John letter. It was a Dear Brad letter. Dear Brad, this was fun, but I'm meeting other boys. And so we got to cut this thing off. Well, what's like number 1 song in the U.S. Right then, but she's out of my life. And I am just a heart-sick puppy. I'm just decimated that this little girl has turned her back on me. And then every time I turn the radio on, Michael is singing She's Out of My Life, which was a beautiful song written by Tom Baylor, sadly based on his real divorce. And I got to work with Tom several times. But I got to tell Michael that story. And I said, you know what? You suck, because that was your song hit my heart right when I was going through an actual little breakup. And he thought it was funny and sweet and real. And I said, I'm dead serious, man. I was like heartsick over this little girl. And then your song has just keep playing and playing and playing. It was amazing that I got to share that with him. So anyway, all that to say, another part of me, I don't know how I got down that long tangent, but Disney. So we'd been working on the Captain EO project with Matt Forger. And so it was like another part of me. I heard it over and over and over again. And I liked it. I mean, it's a great song. Because I'd heard it so many times at Disney, I was kind of like, are they really going to put this on the record? But they did, and I'm glad they did. There were so many good songs and grooves that were considered for the Bad album, but another part of me was one of those that kind of skated in. I don't want to say at the last minute, but it was not a shoe-in. It was not an absolute from the beginning, but it did make it. And it's just I think it's a really clever, cool song. And once again, I mean, the team you've got on this, Paul Jackson Jr. and David Williams on guitars, I mean, that's Michael's go-to team. Then you've got Larry and Gary and Jerry and Kim on horns. You've got Chris Correll on synclav, John Barnes and Rhett Lawrence on synths, and then John Barnes and Michael doing the vocal arrangement. So it's kind of the same team. As you go through Michael Records, you're going to see the same names over and over and over again. So that's another part of me. Then we get to the big heavy hitter, Man in the Mirror, Saida Garrett and Glenn Ballard. Saida has done many, many interviews. She's I don't want to say a dear friend, because that's a little presumptuous on my part, but I've known Saida for years and years and years and absolutely adore her. She has told the story many times, but I think Quincy told her she was part of Quincy's kind of songwriting team with Quest Records. He kind of gave her the decree, we need kind of an anthem, kind of a spiritual, a little bit of a We Are the World type. And I'm reaching for a word. I guess anthem is about the best that I can come up with. And Saida tells the story, but she came into the studio to Quincy and said, I've got it. We did it. We wrote it. And that was Man in the Mirror. And I got to watch this beautiful song be produced and recorded. This is another one of those, once again, I'm going to quickly just go through some of the crew involved on this. Once again, you've got Greg Phillinganes, you've got Dan Huff, Ollie Brown, Randy Kerber. Randy is another one of my favorite pianists, just a remarkably talented guy. Glenn Ballard, obviously. Then you've got Saida. You got the Winan singing, and then of course the Andre Crouch choir. So a couple of quick memories from that. Again, on that particular song, I remember the day Michael recorded the lead vocal. And I didn't usually do this, but I happened to be in front of the console in Westlake Studio D was this couch. And I don't really know how or why it worked out this way, because I didn't usually sit on the couch. I usually kind of stayed in the back. But I sat on the couch and watched Michael record Man in the Mirror. It was amazing. I think for the lead vocal, he did sing that by himself. On I Just Can't Stop Loving You, he sang it with Saida at the same time. But on Mirror, I think Saida did the first pass, and then, she did her parts, and then Michael went out and sang by himself. I'm 90% sure that's how it went down. And it was one of those songs where you just knew this is going to be a long time song. This is going to be something that Michael is really making a name for himself, and it's something that he believed in. Michael is very convincing. He's very compelling when he sings a song like this, because this is where his heart is. And it's a beautiful song that, even though it wasn't written by him, it may as well have been. But Saida and Glenn did a remarkable job on that. I Just Can't Stop Loving You. Again, there's like 50 memories that, as soon as I just say the title, it's just this flood of memories. Another one of those songs that wasn't my favorite. It was kind of the pre-release, meaning Quincy knew that he was working on a pretty magnificent record, album, I should say. Quincy's also a seasoned pro, and you're not going to release Man in the Mirror as your first single. You're going to do a bit more of what's called a throwaway single. So I Just Can't Stop Loving You was that single. There was some talk of who the duet should be with. One of the names that came up was Barbra Streisand. I worked with Barbra, I think, later. Yeah, it was a year or two later on a project called Till I Loved You. Barbara's a obviously, she's Barbra Streisand. Secretly, I was kind of hoping or thankful that it didn't work out for this song. Saida's the right fit. Saida was so young, and the two of them singing together, she was so confident, and the vocal stylings are just perfect. The other thing that's interesting about this song, and I talk about this I go into pretty deep waters, or I should say, depth. This is actually a live band, and to the best of my knowledge, it was the only live band that we used on this entire project. And to the best of my knowledge, it may have been the last time that Michael really did a record. Now, Michael didn't sing with the band, to be clear. And when I say a live band, what I mean is piano, bass, drums, guitar, all playing at the same time. Actually, and I know for you guys that might be like, what? Isn't that how all the songs are recorded? No, most of them were a drum machine. And then you come in and you add keyboards and you add different layers, which we did on this song also. But when it was recorded, it's an actual live band with a drummer doing the count off and the whole thing. Then we added the orchestra and all the synths and everything. So it's funny because the song has grown on me, and over time, especially now that I really break it down and when I do my live events and I kind of take people through just what a magnificent song it is. I don't want to say it's become one of my favorites, but it has grown on me a lot. It's just a beautiful piece of work. Dirty Diana. It's funny, I was thinking about this earlier today. It's such a great song. Having Steve Stevens come in, when Steve came in, obviously Billy Idol's guitarist, he was the whole thing. He's in the leather. He's a rock and roll guy, and came in with his big Marshall stack and just nailed it. And I don't think he was there maybe 3 hours, something like that, if that. No drama, just came in and absolutely nailed it. It's a dirtier kind of song. I mean, it's about a groupie and stuff that, Michael, had to deal with quite often. And it was kind of a fun departure for Michael. At his heart, Michael loved rock and roll. Michael wanted and arguably was a rock star. I think the king of pop, and I'm pontificating now, so don't take anything I say too seriously, but obviously, he wore the title, the king of pop, proudly, but he loved rock, and he loved kind of that darker, dirtier sound. And here's Bruce, recording Steve Stevens and doing Michael's vocals and just some of the crazy effects that he put on that song. I'm just going to glance here and see who some of the musicians were. I mean, once again, you've got John Robinson on drums, you've got Paul Jackson, David Williams, again, on guitars, Chris Corell on synth, John Barnes, Michael Boddicker, and Randy Waldman. Okay, Randy Waldman worked on this one. And that's about it. Jerry Hay gets some credit for rhythm arrangement, but it was a pretty small group, just a powerhouse of a song. And Michael was just kicking the doors of MTV wide open with that video. A great, powerful rock song. But then you've got the Big Daddy, you got Smooth Criminal. Smooth Criminal went through countless versions, and it goes way back to all the Chicago, and Michael loved that whole kind of gangster vibe thing that Smooth Criminal is based on. And this was another one that we worked on a lot. In fact, I'm going to jump ahead and just look at, here you've got, it is a long list of people that contributed to this song. You've got Bill Bottrell, John Robinson, Bruce Swedien. Those are just, that's for drums. Then you've got David Williams, Kim Hutchcroft, Larry Williams on sax, and then saxophones. You've got Gary Grant, Jerry Hay on trumpets. And then there's a muted Steinway. I kind of forgot about that. There was a muted Steinway played by Kevin Maloney. Now that I'm thinking about it, I can kind of hear that. Then, of course, you've got Bruce Swedien. I want everybody to clear the area right now. That's Bruce. That was kind of Bruce's cameo on the record, which I think is really cool. You've got the heartbeat at the beginning. Oh, I skipped over something on I Just Can't Stop Loving You. Maybe I'll go back and talk about that just in a second. We did the whole heartbeat with, we had, let's see if they give credit to the Dr. Eric Shevlin. So yeah, he came in and records Michael's heartbeat. There's a photo of it. If you dig around online, you can probably find it. I may have taken that picture, to be honest with you. And so we recorded Michael's heartbeat and, turned that into kind of the intro of the song. And Bruce's mix is just nuts. Bruce's mix is huge and powerful. To go techie on you just a little bit, Bruce used very few effects, very few compressors. He used a lot of equalizers, but what a compressor does is it kind of squishes the sound down. Bruce was not a big fan of compressors. He likes his songs to have huge dynamics. If you listen to Smooth Criminal, it kind of goes from that whisper to a scream with Michael's heartbeat, and those horns come punching out at you. And that was, it's almost like a masterclass in mixing, to watch Bruce mix these songs and how labor intensive. Bruce didn't wait until the end of the project to mix the song. He was mixing the songs all the way through the production. How many tapes? Many tapes. I would guess that on a song like Smooth Criminal, there's probably, if you broke everything out individually, maybe 160 tracks, something like that. Maybe more, maybe less. And then that has to be kind of shrunk down to 64 tracks so Bruce can mix it all at the same time. It's a labor of love. The amount of tracks and sub-mixes and pre-mixes and offsets and everything that went into just creating that song. It was just a mammoth song. I'm going to go back to I Just Can't Stop Loving You just for a second, because there was something that I glossed over. And I'm not going to take too much time on it, but on the song I Just Can't Stop Loving You, you might remember in the very beginning, and forgive me for my terrible Michael impersonation, but, I just want to lay next to you for a while. Your eyes are so lovely. So we did this little intro, what's called Pillow Talk. And Michael had a lot of, we had Bruce and Quincy and Rod kind of pre-wrote some of the lines for Michael to recite. And then we put it on the record. So when the record first came out, it had that Pillow Talk. Well, the story goes, I was there, but American DJs really did not dig the Pillow Talk. American DJs want the song to start and just go. And this was a long, meandering road to get to the song. So Bruce called me after the album had been released, and when that single came, actually, I think we were still kind of in final production, but whatever it was, Bruce called me and said, we've got to cut that Pillow Talk out. And so he and I went into the studio again and had to cut that out for subsequent pressings of the album. So kind of looking back at the whole thing, I believe the Bad album took about 8 or 9 months, something like that, to produce for the primary album. Now you have to remember that a lot of the songs had already been recorded at Havenhurst for kind of and I hate the word the B team, but kind of, Matt Forger, Bill Bottrell, and Brett Averill, they had done a lot of the pre-production at Havenhurst, and then they brought those tapes into Westlake, and Bruce and Quincy basically re-recorded all of the songs. But a lot of the rough sanding had already been done. But even so, it was about 8 or 9 months, something like that, which is a pretty long project for Quincy Jones. Quincy moves pretty fast, but there were so many songs and so much work went into this record. And there were just so many interesting things happening where the world, the music world was kind of switching from analog to digital. And they weren't quite into hard disk recording yet, Pro Tools, but they were jumping into the digital bandwagon, digital tape. So that was happening. Obviously, drum machines and drum sampling and synclavier, all of those things were happening. At the same time, the public has been buying mainly cassettes up to this point. Some people still bought vinyls, but CDs were just starting. So this was really the last Michael album that was recorded with vinyl and cassettes in mind. After that, everything was straight CD. So you had a lot more time. The Bad album is approximately 40 some odd minutes long, whereas with CDs, you can go to 77 minutes. So once we get to the Dangerous album, we had a lot more room for more songs and longer songs. Looking back at it, it was an absolute pleasure to be a part of it. And once again, as I kind of read through the credits and I see Brad Sundberg, it's a big deal when you're a young guy working in a recording studio, or when you're a young person, I should say, working in a recording studio, and you get your name not just on an album credit, but on a Michael Jackson album credit, which has gone on to sell millions and millions of records. It's a little, it makes you feel good. It's a moment of pride. In a sense, it was a bit of an end of an era, because it was really the last time that Bruce and Rod and Quincy and Michael were going to be working together on a project. After this, Quincy's contractual obligations were over. He'd agreed to do 3 records, Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. And it was time for Michael to go a different direction. I remained friends with all of them for years. After this album, I built 4 recording studios, 4 for Rod Temperton. 1 in Bel Air, 1 in the south of France, and 2 of them in England. 1 in London and 1 in his home in Kent. Bruce and I remained friends for years, until his untimely passing. Quincy, after this project, I did jump into a project with Quincy Jones and Bruce called Back on the Block. So I got to reconnect with Quincy again and spent, probably a year on that project. At some point, I might do a podcast just about that because it's such a remarkable album. And then, of course, Michael. I stayed with Michael until approximately 2004. Worked with him on albums, worked with him at the ranch, worked with him on special projects, on tour prep, on video shoots, all kinds of things, and absolutely adored him. absolutely loved him like a brother. But this was really the first project where I got to watch him be Michael Jackson. I mean, yeah, Captain EO also, but the Bad album just catapulted my respect for him and what an incredible artist and musician he is. So I hope that gives you a little glimpse into what it was like daily. Quite often when Mike would walk into the studio, I'd get a hug. And he's kind of, there's kind of that joke, he's a hugger. Michael loved to give hugs. Quite often when he left the studio, you'd get a hug. And I miss that. I miss those hugs immensely. But I'm grateful for them. And I'm grateful for the friendship that we had and the opportunity that I was given to both work on this project and watch this project come to life. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you're still listening, we hope to do more of these in the future. And you can always find our live events online at www.inthestudiowithmj.com. My name is Brad Sundberg, and thank you for hanging out with me in the studio. Have a great day. Take care. In the Studio, the podcast is produced by Maddie Sundberg. Theme music performed by Buddy Nuanez. Artwork by Andy Healy. Studio electronics provided by Golden Age Project, and studio acoustics provided by Acoustic Sciences Corporation. My name is Brad Sundberg. Thanks so much for hanging out with us in the studio.